What happens when a single moment of disrespect, a flash of anger, collides with a truth so monumental it can shatter a career in an instant? We've all felt that frustration at the airport, at the mercy of a system that feels designed to break us. But for one gate agent, Brenda Jenkins, a routine power trip over a carry-on bag was anything but routine. The woman she chose to humiliate was not just another passenger. She was the ghost in the machine, the silent new owner of the entire airline. This isn't just a story about karma. It's about the day the forgotten soul of an airline came back to claim its body and the reckoning that followed. Stay with us as we unfold the dramatic real-life consequences of one woman's shocking mistake. Before we begin, where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments. If you love inspiring stories of resilience and justice, make sure to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more incredible tales. Your support helps us share these impactful stories with even more people. Now let's get into it. The air in Terminal C of Chicago O'Hare International Airport was thick with the usual cocktail of human anxiety. Stale coffee, jet fuel, and the low incessant hum of thousands of conversations going nowhere. It was a symphony of controlled chaos, a place where time seemed to both stretch and compress. For Dr. Evelyn Reed, it was a research laboratory. Dressed in simple, elegant charcoal gray travel slacks, a comfortable cashmere sweater, and practical yet stylish flats, she looked like any other seasoned traveler. There was no flashy jewelry, no designer logo screaming for attention. Her hair was pulled back in a neat low bun, and her only accessory was a well-worn leather-bound journal and a pen she occasionally used to jot down notes. To the casual observer, she was perhaps a professor, a consultant, or simply a woman on her way to a family visit. No one would guess that the quiet, observant woman sitting near the charging station held the controlling interest in Starlight Airlines, the very company whose decay she was currently witnessing firsthand. The acquisition had been finalized a week ago, a silent, multi-billion-dollar transaction handled by her formidable legal team. The press release was drafted and scheduled for the following Monday. But Evelyn wasn't a hands-off owner. She was a builder, a fixer. Her late husband, Captain Daniel Reed, had been a senior pilot for Starlight for over 20 years. He had loved the airline, spoken of it with a paternal pride, recounting tales from its glory days. The hot towels in coach, the genuinely smiling flight attendants, the sense of adventure. In the last 5 years of his life, however, his stories had soured. They became chronicles of decline, budget cuts that felt more like amputations, plummeting staff morale, and a corporate culture that prioritized nickel and diming passengers over service. Daniel had died suddenly from a heart attack 2 years prior, and in her grief, Evelyn found a new purpose. She had built her own empire in biomedical technology, and now she would use her fortune and her formidable intellect to restore the company Daniel loved as a tribute to his memory. This flight, Starlight 818 to San Francisco, was her final incognito audit. She had flown Starlight 4 times in the past month, each time on a different route, meticulously documenting every crack in the foundation. Today was the final data point. The scene at Gate C-27 was, regrettably, typical. The digital display flickered erratically. The boarding area was littered with overflowing trash cans that a lone, wearied janitor seemed to be perpetually losing a battle against. But the true epicenter of the dysfunction was the gate desk itself. Presiding over it was a woman in her late 40s named Brenda Jenkins. Her uniform was crisp, but her posture was brittle. She wore a name tag that was flipped backward, an act that felt less like an accident and more like a small, passive-aggressive rebellion. Every interaction she had was laced with a palpable impatience. She barked at an elderly man who couldn't hear her announcement, sighed dramatically when a young mother asked if she could pre-board with her toddler, and typed with a ferocity that made the keyboard clatter like angry hail. Evelyn watched her, making a note in her journal. Gate staff appears actively hostile, creates environment of stress, not service, zero proactive engagement. The boarding process began, predictably, with chaos. Brenda's voice crackled over the PA system, a monotone drone that was both too loud and somehow unintelligible. "We will now begin boarding with our Diamond Medallion members. Diamond Medallion only. Have your boarding passes and your passports ready." A young couple, clearly excited for their honeymoon, approached the gate. The woman presented their passes. Brenda snatched them from her hand. "Group 4, she said flatly, her eyes not leaving her computer screen. "We are not on Group 4. "Oh," the young man stammered. "We thought. You need to listen to the announcements." Brenda cut him off, thrusting the passes back at them. "Step aside. You're holding up the line." The couple, embarrassed and flushed, shuffled away. Evelyn's pen moved again. "Publicly shames passengers for minor mistakes. No empathy. Treats customers as an inconvenience." The line moved at a glacial pace. Finally, they called Group 3, Evelyn's group. She packed her journal into her leather tote bag, stood and joined the queue. The tote was a gift from Daniel, impeccably made, and contained her laptop, her journal, and a few personal items. It fit perfectly under every airline seat she'd ever put it under. Her other bag was a standard, regulation-size carry-on roller bag. She'd measured it herself before leaving home. It was well within the stated dimensions on Starlight's own website. As she approached the desk, Brenda's eyes, cold and dismissive, did a quick, judgmental scan of her attire. It was a look Evelyn knew well. The silent calculation, the snap judgment based on race and perceived class. In a world of luxury brands, Evelyn's quiet elegance was often misinterpreted as lack. "Good morning," Evelyn said, offering a small, pleasant smile. Brenda didn't return the greeting. Her eyes were fixed on Evelyn's roller bag. "That bag looks too big," she stated, not as a question, but as a verdict. "I can assure you it isn't," Evelyn replied calmly. "It's a standard carry-on. I fly with it all the time." "All airlines are different," Brenda retorted, her voice dripping with condescension. "And our policy is very strict. You'll need to put it in the sizer." She gestured toward the dreaded metal cage off to the side, the instrument of torture for many a traveler. It was a power trip, plain and simple. Evelyn had seen a dozen bags larger than hers go through without a second glance. This was personal. This was targeted. Still, Evelyn maintained her composure. This was a data point after all. A very, very telling one. "Of course," she said, her voice even. She calmly walked her bag over to the sizer. But as she went to place it in, Brenda stormed over from behind the desk, her face a mask of furious impatience. "Let me do it," she snapped, grabbing the handle from Evelyn's hand. "You're holding up the entire boarding process." And then, with a shocking display of aggression, Brenda didn't just place the bag in the sizer. She tried to jam it in sideways, at an impossible angle, scraping the fine leather trim against the metal bars. It obviously wouldn't fit that way. "See?" Brenda declared triumphantly, her voice loud enough for everyone in the vicinity to hear. "Too big. Just as I thought. You'll have to check it. That'll be $65. The storm had not just gathered, it had broken directly over Gate C-27, and Brenda Jenkins had no idea she was trying to flood the very woman who owned the sky. The silence that followed Brenda's pronouncement was heavy and uncomfortable. Passengers in line exchanged awkward glances, their faces a mixture of pity for Evelyn and relief that they weren't the target. The young honeymooning couple who had been scolded earlier watched with wide, sympathetic eyes. Evelyn looked from the mangled position of her bag back to Brenda's smug face. Her own composure was a dam holding back a flood of emotions. Indignation at the blatant injustice, frustration at the broken system her late husband had lamented, and a cold, rising anger at the personal nature of the attack. "Ma'am," Evelyn began, her voice still remarkably steady, a testament to years of commanding boardrooms and navigating high-stakes negotiations. "You haven't placed it in the sizer correctly. If you would allow me, I can demonstrate that it fits perfectly." Brenda let out a short, derisive laugh. "Oh, I'm sure you can. Everyone thinks they have a magic trick. The rule is the rule. The bag doesn't fit." She gestured grandly at the wedged suitcase. The evidence is right there. Now, are you going to pay the fee, or are you going to continue to delay this flight for everyone else? She was weaponizing the other passengers, attempting to turn the crowd against Evelyn. It was a classic tactic of a petty tyrant. "I'm not delaying the flight," Evelyn stated, her tone hardening just a fraction. "You are, by deliberately mishandling my property and misrepresenting your own airline's policy." She looked at Brenda's reversed name tag. "And I would appreciate it if you would tell me your name." This was a mistake. To Brenda, this was not a reasonable request for accountability. It was a challenge to her authority. Her eyes narrowed into slits. "My name is none of your business," she spat. "My name is Gate Agent, and Gate Agent is telling you to pay the fee. Now." "I see," Evelyn said softly. She reached for her bag, intending to simply place it in the sizer correctly and end the charade. But Brenda was faster. With a grunt of theatrical effort, Brenda yanked the bag out of the sizer. But she didn't just place it on the floor. In a move of pure, unadulterated malice, she pivoted, and with a flick of her wrists, threw the carry-on. It wasn't a gentle toss. It was a forceful, angry throw. The bag tumbled end over end, landing with a sickening thud against the leg of a row of bolted-down waiting chairs 5 feet away. A collective gasp rippled through the line, the sound of high-quality leather and carefully packed contents absorbing the impact echoed in the now silent gate area. For a moment, Evelyn was too stunned to speak. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. The sight of her bag, a bag Daniel had given her for their 10th anniversary, a bag that had traveled with her through corporate triumphs and personal grief, lying discarded on the dirty floor like a piece of trash, was a profound violation. It wasn't just a bag. It was a symbol, and Brenda had just desecrated it in front of a crowd. The shock on Evelyn's face was quickly replaced by a glacial calm that was far more terrifying than any shouting match could ever be. She slowly turned her gaze from her bag back to Brenda. The temperature at gate C-27 seemed to drop 20 degrees. "You have just damaged my personal property," Evelyn said, her voice low and dangerously precise. "You have refused to identify yourself, and you have grossly mishandled this entire situation. I would like to speak to your supervisor, immediately." Brenda, high on her adrenaline surge of power, was undeterred. "Fine," she sneered, crossing her arms. "You can talk to Mark all you want. He'll tell you the same thing. Policy is policy. Maybe next time you'll buy a bag that fits and learn to follow the rules." She turned her back on Evelyn and marched back to the podium, picking up the microphone with a flourish. "Attention passengers, we are experiencing a slight delay due to a non-compliant passenger. We appreciate your patience." The public shaming was now complete. Evelyn, the anonymous billionaire, the grieving widow, the new owner of Starlight Airlines, stood alone in the center of the gate area, her bag lying abused on the floor. She took a deep, steadying breath, retrieving her phone from her tote. She didn't dial her legal team or her chief of staff. Not yet. First, she discreetly started a video recording, pointing the phone's camera at her damaged bag on the floor, then panning slowly across the gawking crowd to the smug, defiant face of Brenda Jenkins behind the counter. This was no longer just an audit. This was an act of war. And Brenda Jenkins had just armed her opponent with irrefutable evidence for the court-martial to come. A few minutes later, a man scurried toward the gate, a sheen of sweat on his upper lip despite the terminal's air conditioning. This was Mark Peterson, the hub supervisor. He was a man who had mastered the art of looking busy while accomplishing very little. His uniform shirt was a size too tight, and his tie was cinched with the desperation of someone clinging to the last rung of middle management. Brenda met him halfway, speaking in a low, conspiratorial tone, gesturing animatedly towards Evelyn. Mark listened, nodding with a practiced, placating expression. Evelyn could practically hear the one-sided narrative being spun. A difficult, entitled passenger refusing to follow rules, becoming aggressive, causing a scene. Mark approached Evelyn, his face a carefully constructed mask of managerial concern. "Ma'am, I'm Mark Peterson, the supervisor here. Brenda tells me we're having a little trouble with a carry-on. Evelyn's gaze was unwavering. "Mr. Peterson, a little trouble is a gross understatement. Your employee, who refuses to give her name, deliberately misrepresented your baggage policy, damaged my personal property by throwing it, and then publicly announced that I was the cause of a delay that she, in fact, created." Mark's practiced smile faltered. This was not the simple customer is angry about a fee situation he was hoping for. The woman in front of him spoke with an unnerving clarity and authority. "Well," he began, stalling for time, "Brenda is one of our most experienced agents. She knows the policies inside and out. Sometimes bags that appear to be regulation size are just a bit over, especially when they're overpacked." "The bag is not overpacked," Evelyn stated flatly. "And the issue is no longer about the bag's dimensions. The issue is about the conduct of your staff. Are you telling me it's Starlight Airlines' policy to throw a passenger's luggage across the floor?" A few people still lingering in the line murmured in agreement. Mark was losing control of the narrative. He glanced nervously at Brenda, who stood with her arms crossed, glaring daggers at Evelyn. "Of course not," Mark said, trying to sound soothing. "But tempers can flare during the stress of boarding. I'm sure she didn't mean to be so forceful." "Forceful?" Evelyn repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. "Mr. Peterson, I have the entire incident on video. The way she jammed the bag into the sizer, her refusal to identify herself, and the throw. Would you like to see it?" The color drained from Mark's face. Video. That changed everything. That was evidence. That meant reports. That meant his boss, the terminal director, would get involved. That won't be necessary," he stammered. "Look, we want to get this flight out on time. As a gesture of goodwill, I'll waive the $65 baggage fee. We'll just check your bag for you, free of charge, and get you on the plane." He beamed, as if he had just solved world peace. He thought he was offering a solution. Evelyn knew he was offering a bribe to make a problem disappear. Evelyn considered him for a long moment. She saw the systemic rot Daniel had talked about, standing right in front of her. Mark wasn't interested in the truth or in rectifying his employees' abhorrent behavior. He was interested in expediency. He was sweeping it under the rug. "No," Evelyn said, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. "I will not be checking my bag. I will be taking it on board with me, as is my right." She walked over to the bag, picked it up, and carried it to the sizer. With one smooth, effortless motion, she slid it in, wheels first, the correct way. It dropped into the cage with a soft click, with inches to spare on all sides. A low ooh went through the remaining passengers. It was the moment of absolute vindication. Brenda's face, watching from the podium, turned from smugness to a flash of pure fury, quickly masked by disbelief. Mark Peterson looked like he had swallowed a bug. He stared at the bag, then at Evelyn, his mind clearly struggling to reconcile the reality with the story Brenda had fed him. "As you can see," Evelyn said, pulling her bag out, "it fits, it always did." She turned and looked directly at Brenda. "I will still be paying the $65 fee." Mark blinked. "But why? I said I'd waive it." "Because I want the transaction on record," Evelyn said, pulling a credit card from her wallet. "I want a receipt for the $65 I was forced to pay for a perfectly compliant bag after it was damaged by your employee. It will be useful." She walked to the podium and held out the card. Brenda, looking utterly defeated and confused, took it mechanically. Her hands fumbled with the credit card machine. The confidence she had worn like armor was gone, replaced by a sullen, resentful silence. She handed the receipt and card back to Evelyn without making eye contact. Evelyn tucked the receipt carefully into her wallet, picked up her bags, and walked down the jet bridge without another word. The victory was hollow. The state of her airline was worse than she had imagined. On board the aircraft, she found her seat in business class, 2B. As she settled in, a flight attendant offered her a pre-departure drink. She requested water and tried to calm the cold anger still simmering within her. A few moments later, the cockpit door opened, and the captain stepped out to greet the passengers in the forward cabin, a practice Daniel had always insisted on. He was a man in his late 50s, with kind eyes and silvering temples. He made his way down the aisle, offering warm greetings. When he got to Evelyn's seat, he stopped short. His eyes widened in recognition, then confusion, then dawning realization. "Evelyn Reed?" he asked, his voice a low whisper of disbelief. "My God, what are you doing on this flight?" It was Captain Miller, a man who had flown with her husband for a decade, a man who had been at Daniel's funeral. Back at the gate, Brenda was processing the last of the standby passengers. "What was that all about?" her coworker asked. "Just another entitled passenger who thinks the rules don't apply to her," Brenda grumbled. But as she watched the jet bridge pull away, the image of the pilot's shocked face as he recognized the woman replayed in her mind. Who was she? Why would Captain Miller know her? For the first time that day, a tiny, cold seed of doubt began to sprout in the barren ground of Brenda Jenkins's certainty. Up at 35,000 feet, the rumble of the engines was a soothing balm. Captain Miller had insisted on speaking with Evelyn privately once they reached cruising altitude. He had a flight attendant discreetly watch over the first officer while he stepped into the galley, closing the curtain for a semblance of privacy. He looked at Evelyn, his expression a mix of sorrow and deep respect. "Evelyn," he began, his voice low and earnest. "When I saw your name on the manifest, I thought it must be a coincidence. But then seeing you, I am so terribly sorry for your loss. Daniel was one of the finest men I ever knew, the heart of this airline truly." Evelyn felt a familiar pang of grief, softened by the captain's genuine warmth. "Thank you, Robert. It's good to see you. Daniel always spoke so highly of you." "He talked about you all the time." Captain Miller smiled sadly. "The brilliant scientist, the business prodigy. He was so proud. Which is why I have to ask, what happened back there at the gate? I saw the tail end of it. The agent looked hostile, and you looked furious." Evelyn finished for him, a wry smile touching her lips. "And I was. She damaged the bag Daniel gave me." She paused, then decided that Robert Miller, a man who embodied the airline's former spirit, deserved to know the truth. "Robert, I need what I'm about to tell you to remain in the strictest confidence, just for a few more days." He nodded, his brow furrowed with curiosity. "I didn't just buy a ticket on this flight," Evelyn said, her voice dropping slightly. "A week ago, my private equity firm, Reed Capital, finalized the acquisition of a 90% controlling stake in Starlight Airlines." Captain Miller's jaw literally dropped. He stared at her, his mind visibly processing the impossible. He looked around the galley, at the Starlight logo on the coffee pot, then back at Evelyn's determined face. You bought the airline?" "I did," she confirmed. "The public announcement is Monday morning. These past few weeks I've been flying as a passenger, conducting a final on-the-ground assessment of the customer experience before we begin the overhaul." "An overhaul." Miller breathed the words like a prayer. He ran a hand over his face. "Evelyn, you have no idea how bad it's gotten. The morale is shattered. They've stripped everything down to the bone. We're flying with skeleton crews. The maintenance budget is a joke. And the corporate office treats the flight staff and the passengers like they're the enemy. Daniel saw it coming. It broke his heart." "It broke mine, too," Evelyn said softly. "Hearing it from him and now seeing it for myself. That's why I'm here. This isn't a hostile takeover, Robert. It's a rescue mission. I'm doing this for him." The captain's eyes welled up. He understood completely. The purchase wasn't a cold business transaction. It was an act of love, a legacy project. Daniel would be, I don't even have the words. He'd be so incredibly proud, Evelyn. He shook his head, a slow, disbelieving smile spreading across his face. "That woman at the gate, that agent, does she have any idea?" "None at all," Evelyn said, "nor does her supervisor who tried to sweep the whole thing under the rug. They are, for me, Exhibit A in the case against the current state of Starlight Airlines. They represent the cancer of indifference that has been allowed to metastasize throughout this company. Brenda Jenkins, Captain Miller said, his voice suddenly hard. I've heard the complaints about her for years. She's infamous among the flight crews. Sullen, aggressive, a real pleasure to deal with at the end of a long haul. And her boss, Mark Peterson, is a classic paper pusher. Never rocks the boat, never holds anyone accountable. He just manages to fail upwards. Their names have been noted, Evelyn said, her expression grim, along with a detailed account of the incident. Captain Miller stood a little straighter, a spark of the old pride returning to his eyes. What are you going to do? On Monday morning, the world will know that Starlight has new ownership, Evelyn explained. But the real changes start the moment we land in San Francisco. I'm convening an emergency meeting with the board and senior management. The current CEO will be given an early retirement package, effective immediately. We're going to gut the corporate culture from the top down. We're going to reinvest in our people, in our fleet, and in the very idea of service. We are going to make this an airline Daniel would be proud to fly for again. Captain Miller was speechless. He simply nodded, a look of profound gratitude on his face. He knew he was witnessing the dawn of a new era for the airline he loved. Meanwhile, back at O'Hare, Brenda Jenkins was finishing her shift. The encounter with the woman in seat 2B gnawed at her. The woman's unnatural composure, her precise language, paying the fee she didn't have to pay just to get a receipt. And Captain Miller knowing her by name. It was all off. Hey, Mark, she said, catching her supervisor as he was leaving his office. That woman from the flight to SFO, the one with the bag. It was weird how Captain Miller knew her, right? Mark Peterson, eager to forget the entire incident and the uncomfortable video evidence the woman claimed to have, waved a dismissive hand. Who knows? Maybe she's an old family friend, a distant cousin. Miller's been flying for 30 years. He probably knows half the country. Don't worry about it, Brenda. You did your job. You enforced the policy. Brenda nodded, but she wasn't convinced. She said she was going to use the receipt. She said it would be useful. Just blowing smoke, Mark said with false confidence. Trying to scare us. Rich people do that, forget it, it's over. But it wasn't over. As Starlight 818 began its descent into San Francisco, the gears of a corporate revolution were already turning. Evelyn Reed was reviewing her notes, a general preparing her battle plan. For Brenda Jenkins and Mark Peterson, who believed the day was ending like any other, the storm they had unleashed was about to turn back and hit them with the force of a hurricane. They had no idea that their entire professional world was about to be dismantled, piece by piece, by the very woman they had dismissed and humiliated. The reckoning was just hours away. The wheels of Starlight 818 had barely touched the tarmac at SFO when Evelyn Reed's phone came alive. While other passengers were turning on their devices to a cascade of social media notifications and texts from loved ones, Evelyn's screen lit up with a single encrypted message from her chief of staff, David Chen. Conference line is hot. Board members are standing by. We are a go on your command. Evelyn replied with a single word, execute. She remained in her seat, allowing the other passengers to deplane. Captain Miller emerged from the cockpit and gave her a subtle, determined nod as he passed. Godspeed, Evelyn, he murmured. She nodded back, a silent acknowledgement of their new alliance. Once the cabin was empty, she gathered her things, including the scuffed carry-on bag, and walked calmly into the terminal. She ignored the bustling arrivals hall and headed straight for the Starlight Airlines Admiral's Lounge. She presented her boarding pass to the lounge agent, who gave her a perfunctory welcome. Evelyn found a quiet private cubicle in the back, the kind usually reserved for executives making last-minute calls. It was a fitting, ironic location for the coup she was about to stage. She took out her laptop, connected to the secure network, and clicked the link to the video conference. One by one, the faces of Starlight's senior executive team populated the screen. There was CEO George Maxwell, a portly man with a perpetually florid face, who looked annoyed to have his Friday afternoon interrupted. There was Cynthia Sterling, the COO, known for her ruthless cost-cutting measures, and a half-dozen other vice presidents, all looking comfortable and complacent in their home offices. They saw a new face on the call, David Chen, but assumed he was a tech or a consultant. They had no idea who Evelyn was. David Chen, a sharp, impeccably dressed man in his late 30s, began the meeting. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining on short notice. I am David Chen, Chief of Staff for Dr. Evelyn Reed, the new principal stakeholder of Starlight Airlines." A wave of confusion and shock washed over the executives' faces. George Maxwell sputtered, "New stakeholder? What is this nonsense? Our last board meeting was yesterday," David cut in smoothly. "The transaction was finalized this morning. Dr. Reed, through her holding company, now controls 92% of Starlight's voting shares. Dr. Reed is on the line with us now." Evelyn unmuted her microphone. The camera on her laptop activated, showing her sitting in the very lounge their company operated, the Starlight logo visible on the wall behind her. "Good afternoon, Mr. Maxwell," Evelyn said, her voice calm and authoritative. The executives stared, dumbfounded. The woman on the screen was not some corporate raider they recognized from the Wall Street Journal. She was a complete unknown. "For the past month," Evelyn began, "I have been conducting a personal audit of our services. I've flown on your planes, I've eaten your food, and I have sat in your gate areas. My final audit concluded about an hour ago, on Flight 818 from Chicago, and what I have found is not a company in need of trimming. I have found a company in the advanced stages of corporate necrosis." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The cold, hard precision of her words was more effective than any shouting. "Today, at Gate C-27 in Chicago, I was personally subjected to a masterclass in everything that is wrong with this airline. I witnessed an agent, Brenda Jenkins, publicly berate multiple passengers. When I approached, she baselessly accused me of having an oversized bag, and when I questioned her, she threw my luggage across the terminal floor." Gasps could be heard from some of the VPs. CEO George Maxwell looked horrified, not for the customer, but for the potential lawsuit. "I then called for her supervisor, Mark Peterson," Evelyn continued, her eyes boring into the camera. "He did not investigate. He did not reprimand his employee. He attempted to placate me by waiving a fee I shouldn't have been charged in the first place, and his sole objective was to hide the incident to ensure an on-time departure. He prioritized a meaningless metric over customer dignity, safety, and basic human decency. This, I have learned, is the Starlight way." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. This culture of contempt for the customer, and by extension for your own frontline employees, starts at the top. It starts with you. Her gaze swept across the screen, meeting the eyes of each executive. "Your leadership has failed. You have traded long-term brand loyalty for short-term profit margins. You have stripped the soul from this company, a company my late husband, Captain Daniel Reed, gave 25 years of his life to." The mention of one of their own senior pilots, a name many of them would recognize, sent another shockwave through the call. This was personal. "Therefore, my first act as the new owner is to clean house," Evelyn declared. "Mr. Maxwell, your tenure as CEO is over, effective immediately. David has your separation agreement ready. It is generous, conditional on your full and silent cooperation. Cynthia, your position as COO is also terminated. Your strategy of cannibalizing the company's assets for shareholder dividends ends today. You will be replaced by Mr. David Chen, effective immediately." Maxwell and Sterling were ash-faced, stunned into silence. "Furthermore," Evelyn went on, her voice like ice, "I am ordering an immediate full-scale audit of the entire Chicago O'Hare Hub's management structure. I want every performance review, every customer complaint, and every personnel file associated with Mark Peterson and Brenda Jenkins on my desk by Monday morning. I want to know how people like this are not only employed but, in Mr. Peterson's case, promoted. Both are to be suspended with pay, pending the outcome of this investigation. Have security escort them from the premises if they are still on site. I want it handled discreetly, but decisively." She looked at the remaining VPs, their faces pale with terror. "For the rest of you, your jobs are safe for now. Your new mandate is simple. You will work with Mr. Chen to build a new Starlight Airlines from the ground up, one founded on a non-negotiable principle: dignity. Dignity for our passengers and dignity for our employees. Anyone who does not subscribe to this new philosophy will be invited to follow Mr. Maxwell out the door. We begin Monday at 8 a.m. sharp. Thank you for your time." With that, Evelyn ended the call, leaving a smoldering crater in the lives of Starlight's executive team. She took a sip of water, her face impassive. She then forwarded the video she had taken at the gate to David Chen with a simple message: Exhibit A. The blitzkrieg was over. The reconstruction was about to begin. And for Brenda Jenkins and Mark Peterson, who were likely just sitting down to dinner, the world they knew had just been irrevocably and violently altered. Their names were now at the very top of a corporate hit list, and the executioner was the woman they thought they had vanquished just a few hours before. For Brenda Jenkins, Friday evening was a ritual of decompression. She'd kicked off her sensible work shoes, poured a large glass of cheap Chardonnay, and was watching a mind-numbing reality TV show. The incident with the woman and the bag was already fading, mentally filed away under annoying passengers. Mark had told her to forget it, and she was happy to comply. Her feet hurt, her head ached, and all she wanted was to not think about Starlight Airlines until her shift on Monday. Her phone rang at 7:48 p.m. The caller ID read Starlight Corporate HR. A call from HR on a Friday night was never good news. Her heart gave a nervous flutter. "Hello, this is Brenda." "Miss Jenkins, this is Arthur Vance from Human Resources." The voice on the other end was cold, formal, and utterly devoid of warmth. "I'm calling to inform you that, effective immediately, you are being placed on administrative leave with pay, pending a full investigation into an incident that occurred today at Gate C-27. Brenda sat bolt upright, the wine glass sloshing in her hand. "What? An investigation over what? Some passenger got her feelings hurt because her bag was too big? The specifics of the investigation are confidential at this time," Arthur Vance said, his voice a bureaucratic stonewall. "You are not to report for your scheduled shifts, nor are you to access any company property or systems. A corporate security team will be contacting you to retrieve your ID badge and any other company assets in your possession. You will be contacted by the investigative team next week to schedule a formal interview. Do you have any questions?" Brenda was flabbergasted. "Questions? Yeah, I have questions. This is insane. It was a routine baggage dispute. I was following policy. Mark, my supervisor, Mark Peterson, he was there. He saw the whole thing. He'll back me up. Mr. Peterson's statement will also be taken as part of the investigation," the HR man said, his tone suggesting this was not the get-out-of-jail-free card Brenda thought it was. "That is all the information I can provide at this time. Good evening, Miss Jenkins." The line went dead. Brenda stared at her phone, her mind reeling. Suspended, security retrieving her badge. This was what happened to people who stole or got into fistfights, not to someone enforcing the rules. A cold dread, colder than her wine, began to creep up her spine. The woman. The calm, well-dressed black woman. The way Captain Miller knew her. The strange comment about the receipt being useful. This was no ordinary complaint. This was something else. Her panic rising, she immediately called Mark Peterson. "Mark, it's Brenda. Did you hear? They suspended me," she screeched into the phone. Mark's voice was shaky, terrified. "They got me too, Brenda. They got me too." He was at home trying to enjoy a pizza with his family when he received a similar call. Only his was from the new interim COO, David Chen. The call was brutally short. Mark was informed his leadership was under review. He was suspended, and that his systemic failure to manage his staff and resolve conflict was a liability the new ownership was not willing to tolerate. The words new ownership hit Mark like a physical blow. "What do you mean they got you too?" Brenda demanded. "What's going on? Who is she?" "I don't know, Brenda," Mark wailed, his voice cracking. "But she's not just some passenger. There's new ownership, a total takeover of the company. It happened today. That call I got, it wasn't our usual HR. It was someone new, someone final. They knew everything. They knew I didn't get your name for her. They knew I tried to just waive the fee. They knew." The reality of the situation crashed down on Brenda with the force of a physical impact. She sank back into her couch, the wine forgotten. This wasn't a complaint that would result in a slap on the wrist. This was a corporate execution. She hadn't just angered a passenger. She had, on her very first day, thrown the property of the new queen onto the floor. Her mind raced, replaying every detail. Her sneering tone, her refusal to give her name, the throw, the public announcement blaming the passenger. Every action was a nail in her own coffin. She thought about her life. This job, as much as she complained about it, was all she had. It paid for the mortgage on her small condo. More importantly, it provided the health insurance that paid for her elderly mother's expensive Alzheimer's medication. Her mother lived with her, and the cost of her care was astronomical. Without that insurance, without that steady paycheck, the small, petty power she had wielded so carelessly at the gate, the satisfaction she got from putting someone in their place, now seemed like the most foolish, self-destructive act of her life. She had been a minor tyrant in a tiny kingdom, and she had just discovered that her peasant was, in fact, the empress. For Mark Peterson, the terror was different. It was the terror of the mediocre man exposed. His entire career was built on avoiding responsibility, passing blame, and maintaining the status quo. He had a wife, 2 kids in college, and a lifestyle that depended entirely on his meticulously maintained image of competence. He knew with sickening certainty that an investigation would reveal years of ignored complaints against Brenda and others, a pattern of neglect he had actively cultivated. He wouldn't just lose his job, his professional reputation would be annihilated. Throughout the weekend, a state of sheer panic consumed them both. They were locked out of their work emails, their calls to colleagues went unanswered, or were met with nervous platitudes. They were ghosts in a machine that had already moved on without them. The seed of doubt planted in Brenda's mind at the gate had grown into a suffocating forest of dread. She wasn't just facing unemployment, she was facing ruin. And it was a ruin she had single-handedly and very publicly constructed for herself. The following Wednesday, Brenda Jenkins found herself in a place she never imagined she'd be, the 45th floor of a gleaming skyscraper in downtown Chicago, the North American headquarters of Reed Capital. The letter, delivered by courier, had summoned her not to a dingy airport HR office, but to the very heart of the new power structure. The opulence of the lobby, all polished marble, abstract art, and silent, efficient people in tailored suits, was designed to intimidate. It worked. She was led into a conference room with a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Lake Michigan. The view was worth millions. Sitting at the head of a long mahogany table was Dr. Evelyn Reed. She was no longer in travel clothes. She wore a sharp navy blue power suit, her hair styled perfectly, her demeanor exuding an aura of absolute command. This was not the woman from the gate. This was the woman who had bought an airline. Standing silently by the window was her chief of staff, David Chen. Brenda's hands were clammy. She felt small and utterly powerless. "Miss Jenkins, please, sit," Evelyn said, her voice even and cool. It was the same voice from the gate, but in this context, it carried the weight of an empire. Brenda sat, perching on the edge of a leather chair that likely cost more than her couch. "I asked you here today because I believe in closing loops," Evelyn began, folding her hands on the table. "The investigation into your conduct, and that of Mr. Peterson, is complete. We have reviewed your personnel file, which includes 17 prior customer complaints for rudeness and aggressive behavior over the past 2 years, none of which resulted in any meaningful disciplinary action. We have a sworn statement from Captain Robert Miller," And of course, we have the video of the incident. David Chen discreetly placed a tablet on the table and pressed play. Brenda was forced to watch herself. The sneer, the aggressive jamming of the bag, the shocking throw, and the smug announcement over the PA system. Seeing it from this detached perspective, she felt a wave of shame so profound it made her physically ill. The decision to terminate your employment is, of course, a foregone conclusion, Evelyn stated calmly, as it is for Mr. Peterson, who demonstrated a complete failure of leadership and an instinct for concealment over integrity. That is not the purpose of this meeting. Brenda looked up, confused. Then, why am I here? I want you to understand why this happened, Evelyn said, leaning forward slightly. This isn't about a $65 fee or a scuffed suitcase, Miss Jenkins. It's about dignity. The woman you threw that bag at could have been anyone. She could have been a teacher traveling to a funeral, a young entrepreneur on her way to a make-or-break meeting, a grandmother going to see her family for the last time. You don't know people's stories. But your job, your only job, is to treat every single person who comes to your desk with a baseline of professional respect. You failed. Evelyn's eyes were locked on hers. You assumed I was someone you could push around, someone who didn't matter. You made a judgment based on my appearance and my race, and you decided I was unworthy of courtesy. What you and Mr. Peterson failed to understand is that the moment you dehumanize a customer, you have broken the company's most sacred trust. You became the living embodiment of a brand that is rotten from the inside out. Brenda finally broke. Tears streamed down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered, the words feeling pitiful and inadequate in the cavernous room. I was having a bad day. I'm under a lot of stress. My mother, she's sick, and the bills. My late husband used to fly for Starlight. Evelyn cut her off, not unkindly, but firmly. He loved his job, but he saw the soul of the company dying. He saw the stress the staff was under because of cynical budget cuts from executives who had lost their way. I understand stress, Miss Jenkins, but stress is a reason, not an excuse. It does not give you permission to pass your misery on to others, especially the very people who pay your salary. Evelyn rose and walked to the window, looking out over the city. Your actions on that day set in motion a chain of events that has led to the firing of a CEO, a COO, and a hub supervisor. It has triggered a complete corporate restructuring. In a way, your spectacular failure was the catalyst I needed to prove my case to a complacent board. It was the data point that changed everything. She turned back to face Brenda. Your career with Starlight Airlines is over. However, your final paycheck will include an additional 3 months of severance pay, and your family's health insurance will be continued for the next 6 months, paid for by me, personally. Brenda stared, speechless. This was not the vengeance she expected. It was something far more complex. I am not doing this for you, Evelyn clarified, preempting her thoughts. I am doing it for your mother, who is an innocent party in this, and I'm doing it to make a point. This new company will be built on compassion, but also on accountability. You are being held accountable for your actions, but I will not punish your family for your mistakes. That is the difference between petty tyranny and true leadership. I suggest you use this time to reflect on that difference. David Chen stepped forward and placed a folder on the table. This is your separation agreement, outlining the terms. Please sign it. Your personal effects from your locker will be couriered to your home tomorrow. Brenda, trembling, signed the papers. Her life was in ruins, yet she had been shown a sliver of grace she in no way deserved. As she was escorted out of the building, the full weight of the lesson hit her. She had lost her job not because she threw the bag of the new owner, but because she would have thrown anyone's bag. The identity of the passenger was incidental. The crime was the act itself. The following week, a company-wide broadcast went out to all 40,000 Starlight Airlines employees. In it, Dr. Evelyn Reed, her face calm and resolute, introduced herself as the new owner. She spoke of her late husband's legacy. She announced massive new investments in staff training, higher wages, better benefits, and a new dignity-first customer service policy. She used the incident at Gate C27, without naming Brenda, as an example of the past, a culture they were leaving behind forever. For Evelyn, it was the first step in a long journey to restore the soul of her husband's beloved airline. For Brenda Jenkins, it was the beginning of a harsh and uncertain new life, forever haunted by the day she picked a fight with the wrong passenger, and in doing so, brought an empire of karma crashing down upon her own head. And so, a single act of disrespect became the unlikely catalyst for a corporate revolution. The story of Brenda Jenkins and Dr. Evelyn Reed is a powerful, real-world reminder that our actions, no matter how small we think they are, can have monumental consequences. It's a story about karma, yes, but it's also about something more profound, the difference between power and authority. Brenda had the power of a uniform and a rulebook, but Evelyn Reed commanded the authority of vision, compassion, and a deep sense of purpose. She didn't just fire an employee, she surgically removed a cancer and began the hard work of healing the entire organization. What do you think? Was the severance and extended insurance an act of mercy, or a colder, more calculated power move? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more true stories of drama, karma, and justice. Thank you for listening.